Hey everybody, welcome back to Build a Website from Scratch with HTML and CSS. This video is called Styling Forms. In this lecture, we're going to learn about using CSS to style HTML forms, because by default, HTML forms kind of have the browser-specific styles, and they usually don't look that good, but you can use CSS to make your forms look super attractive, and we're going to do that in this lecture right now. So, first things first, download, there is an extra added to this lecture. It's an image. It's a background image that you want to add to your images folder. It's called button_background.jpg. We're going to be using it in this lecture. So make sure to download that asset and add it to your images folder in your lesson 7 folder. Okay, now add a HTML file called styling-forms.html. Open that up. Add the doc type, the basic page structure, the title of styling forms, link your CSS in the head. And let's get started by adding some HTML that we're going to play around with. So let's add a div and give it the ID of container. We haven't done this yet. We haven't wrapped everything in a container yet, I don't believe, but there's a reason for that, and you'll see that really soon, and it's really cool. In your container, add a level 1 heading and say styling HTML forms. Let's add the form tag, and in the form tag you want to add the field set, and the field set is the border that wraps around the form content. You'll see that in a moment. Add a legend tag, and in the legend let's say contact us. It's basically the big title that's above the form, and you'll also see what that is in a moment. So let's add first a label and then an input, and this input will have the type of text. And this label, we want to say name. But we want to be able to do something else here. So I'll show you what this looks like. It doesn't look very good now, but CSS will make it look better. You can see the field set, the big border that wraps around it, the legend, that is the title above the form, and here is the name and the input with the type of text. When you click on an input, you see how it focuses on the input? That's literally what it's called. It's called focus. And you have this blue border around here, lets you know that you can write in the form. It indicates to the user that the form is ready to, or this input specifically is ready to be typed into. When you click on the form, the input, it focuses, but it's good practice so that when you click on the label of the form element, that the input also focuses. But currently it doesn't do that, and by default it doesn't, but it's good usability to do so. So let's do that. It's really easy. Give the input an ID, and we're going to say contact_name is the ID of this input. And label has an attribute called for, and for is going to be the value of the ID of the input that it's trying to connect to. So this gives it a relationship. This gives the label and the input a unique relationship, whereas before they were totally separate elements. So this will be contact_name. So now these two have a connection. And if you save that and check it out in your browser, if you click on the label now, it will focus on its respective input. There it is. That's super good usability. So do that for all of your forms. It's good practice. Copy this combination, paste it, and let's change the values. This will be email. For will also be contact email, meaning we need to change the ID of the input to email, and the type can be changed to email, just for semantic reasons. Just it has more meaning. The form has more meaning. All right, paste it one more time here. Change this to message, contact message, but instead of an input, we're actually going to put a text area. The text area can also have an ID, and we're going to give it the ID of contact message to reflect the for attribute here. So they're connected. So let's add one more input, and that will be the type of submit. So it's a submit button. We're also going to give it the attribute value, which says send message. So this is what will display in the button itself. Save that. Let's check out the HTML. So here's our form. It's all horizontal right here, and it looks super bad. This isn't how you normally see a form on the web. It's not very usable, other than if you click on the labels, it focuses on the inputs. But it's really poorly designed. It looks bad, and we're going to use CSS to make it look much better. All right, so jump into your styles.css file, and at the bottom, we're going to continue here. Add a forms comment so we can know where our form started. Let's select that container. Remember we added the container at the beginning of the coding the HTML. We're going to do something that we haven't done yet, and you've probably been wondering if you're using a wide browser or you have a big screen and your browser is the full width, you've probably been looking at the websites and the code we've been building, and it spans the full width of the browser, and it looks pretty bad. And you always see these sites on the web, if not most of the sites on the web, at least the newer ones, where the website is centered in the middle of the browser. So for example, apple.com, you can see here that the website is centered in the middle of the browser. It has a width. You could see from edge to edge here. And if I were to go in the website, you could see all the content is centered in the middle of the browser. It's not over to the left and spanning the full width of the site or the browser. So you're probably wondering, how do I do that? It's actually really easy, and it's a quick little trick. So in your container selector right here, give the container a width. So we're going to say the width is 500 pixels, and then margin 0, and then auto. So this means 0 pixels on the top, auto on the right, 0 on the bottom, and auto on the left. Auto means just match what the opposite side's margin is. So basically the right is looking at the left side and saying, I'll be the same width as the left one. And because they're both auto, they're just centering the container in the middle of the browser. So it's just kind of a neat little trick. And we can check that out now in our browser. So there you go. We have a 500 pixel wide container, and it's centered in the middle. So really cool trick. A lot of websites do it, and we're going to be using that trick now from this point forward for all of our little mini websites we'll be building. All right, back to our CSS. Moving on, let's select the form itself, and let's give it a background image. The URL of the image will be images/red_background.jpg. We're not going to add any more properties for the background because we want it to just tile seamlessly all across the form. So let's check it out. So there we go. We have this red textured background. Let's add some more styles here. Let's say padding 20 pixels on all sides of the form. Font family, I want it to be Helvetica, Arial, sans serif, because by default the body is, I believe, using Georgia. We want the form to be Helvetica. Check it out. There we go, some padding and a new font family. All right, let's select the form. So this is a descendant selector here. Field set. So I want to select the field set within the form. Background image. URL. I want this to be images/blue_background.jpg. Save that, and let's just give it a look. So there we go. We've got a blue background, textured background in here using background images. But let's give it some more breathing room. Padding, 40 pixels. And I want the border, instead of the default browser style, I want it just to be solid 1 pixel white. Save that and check it out. There we go. That looks a little bit better. However, the inputs, that is a mess, and I don't even know what's happening there. So we're going to use CSS to make it look better. But first, let's just clean up the form legend, and then we'll make our way down to those inputs. Let's give it the border of solid 1 pixel 333 dark gray. Background URL images/blue_background.jpg. Background image to be more specific. Padding 5 pixels. Font size 30 pixels. Font weight bold. So we just did a bunch of things there. Let's check it out and I'll run through it. So there we go. Here is the legend. So I wanted it to have a black border, a solid black border all around. I wanted it to have the blue textured background. I wanted the font size to be larger and the font color, and I wanted some padding around each side here. So this just kind of stands out a little bit more. All right, moving on. Now we're going to select our form input, but we're going to do a grouping selector here. Form text area. We want to select all of the form inputs and all of the form text areas. So the inputs include the email and text input and the submit button. Okay, so we're going to say display block, because right now they're all display in line, and we want them to be block elements. And you'll see what happens here when we give them display block. They all now take up their own line. Rather than all of them being in line with each other, literally, we wanted them to be display block. So now they each have their own line in the HTML, and they're stacked above each other. So it's already looking much better. Okay. Margin bottom, 20 pixels. We want all of these inputs in the text areas to have margin bottom of 20 pixels. And if you checked out the the lecture that I added about sexy typography, we're going to add that now. So if you're using Safari, Chrome, or Firefox, you should be able to see these styles. So it's called WebKit Font Smoothing, Anti-Aliased, and Text Rendering. Optimize Legibility. And that's going to clean up the inputs and the text area. It's going to look a little more clean. It's going to trim around the edges of the text. And so you might not have seen it because I need to put something in the form here. So if I just type, it's very, very, very subtle. You might not even see a difference. But if I took it off, let's see. You could see that the text in the inputs are chunkier. There's just a little bit around the edge of the text. The characters, it's just a little bit, I guess chunkier is the only word I can describe. But when you use these CSS styles, it just cleans it up a little bit. It's just a little bit more smooth looking. Certain fonts, you could see it better than others. So we're going to move on from that. Okay. Form, and we're going to select the labels. Font size 11 pixels, text transform, uppercase. Save that, check it out. There we go. Now let's do kind of a grouping selector, but we're also going to select a new thing that we haven't selected before. We're going to select inputs that have specific attributes. So for example, form input. We've already selected form input, but I want to be specific. I want to select inputs with the type of text. So that is how you select an attribute of an element. So I'm selecting inputs, but I only want to select inputs that have the type of text. And this is how you type it out. You have the square brackets and then type equals text, close the square bracket. But this is a grouping selector, so I want to select more. Form, input, type, email, and form text area. I want to select that as well. Padding, 10 pixels. Font size, 20 pixels. Font family, Helvetica, Arial, sans serif, because by default, for some reason, the inputs are given a different font. At least in Safari, it's a browser, a native browser style, and I want to change that. I want to override it. Color, white. Border, solid, 1 pixel. B90707. And we're going to do one more thing. Background image. You can add a background image to inputs, believe it or not. URL, the background image. I'm just going to use the one we've used before a number of times. Images, red_background.jpg. Save that. Now let's check out our form inputs. There we go. They look so much cooler. So we've got white text. We've got a new font in there. Let's actually just write some stuff here. So you can see the white text, Helvetica font. It's tightened up here. You could see shaved around the edges. The Helvetica looks a little cleaner than it usually does. We've got that red textured background. We've got a kind of a darker salmon type color border. And we've got some padding, and it's looking pretty good so far. All right, let's keep going. After our inputs here, let's select the text area. I want to do a couple things with the text area. Width, 300 pixels. Height, 100 pixels. So it stands out a little bit more like a message form, kind of like a text area here like you usually see. It's a convention that these are usually bigger. It indicates that you could type multiple lines of text. All right, moving on to the last thing we're going to style, form input, and we're going to select the button type equals submit. So I'm selecting form input with the attribute of submit. So this is going to be the submit button. Border, none. And background, this is where we're going to add the background that you downloaded as an extra to the lecture called button_background. Background URL images / button_background.jpg top left repeat X. Now this means get the background image in the images folder, position it top left, and then repeat it along the X axis, or repeat it horizontally. Now if I save that, it's probably not going to look that good quite yet because there's still a lot left. That's not what the image looks like. So the image by default is 40 pixels tall and 10 pixels wide. So I'm going to tile it along the horizontal or the x-axis, and it's tileable. This image is tileable. I've created it so it's seamless and it can go infinite horizontally, but the height is 40 pixels. And the reason why that's important is because we want the height of the button to be 40 pixels, so it perfectly fits that image. Padding, 0 on the top and bottom, 20 on the left and right. We want the border to be solid, 1 pixel, and then D4730C. Color, we want it to be white. Font weight, bold. Font family, by default, the browser is giving the submit button a different font family, and I don't want that, so I'm going to override it and say Helvetica, Arial Sans Serif. And the, well, let's check that out right now. Let's see what that looks like. So pretty darn good. It's basically perfect. We have the border, we have the background image. It looks like a shiny button. We've got the white Helvetica text in here, but there's one thing that I'm not cool with. When I hover over the button, my cursor is still the default arrow, but I want it to be that little hand pointer, and you can actually do that in CSS. All it is the property cursor and then pointer. Save that, check it out. Now if you hover over the input button, you have a cursor pointer. Perfect. All right, so good job on the forms. Feel free to run through this lecture again if you want, if it was a little fast for you. It is kind of a lot of territory to cover, and I will see you in the next lecture.